My husband returned victorious from battle, bringing back a pregnant woman to take as his secondary wife. He even threatened me, saying if anything happened to her or her child, I would be buried alive with them. I raised my hand and slapped Chiyu across the face. Have I been confined to the inner courtyard too long that you've forgotten my status? If you wish to take a secondary wife, this princess will divorce you. Chiyu tried to strike back, but I crippled both his arms. When Chiyu rode triumphantly back to the capital, his procession collided with my carriage returning to the city. We sat facing each other from afar, one in a palanquin, the other astride a horse. In the end, Chiyu dismounted first. From the carriage behind him emerged a young maiden. A lotus flower face, willow leaf brows, clad entirely in white, a pure, delicate little white lotus. But my gaze settled on the white lotus's rounded belly. Chiyu had marched out in March, now autumn had just begun. Seems he got busy the moment he left. Chiyu and I never shared any real affection, it was purely a political marriage. The Chi family was a lineage of military commanders, generation after generation wielding military power. Chiyu was the most outstanding among the younger generation. Originally, he and the eldest daughter of the chancellor's family were deeply in love, even planning to secretly pledge their lives to each other. Joking aside, pairing a military family with the head of the civil officials? Only an emperor with a fevered mind would consider such a match. Then the emperor remembered me, a powerless, orphan princess with no influence. With an imperial decree, he smashed this pair of lovebirds apart. And I became the weapon in the emperor's hand. First, I held no real power, only the empty title of princess. Second, my noble birth made me a more than suitable match for Chiyu. Chiyu naturally bore me no favor, a woman who had barged into his idyllic romance. Shortly after our marriage, he volunteered for frontier duty, though it seemed more like a hunting expedition. Little Lotus hid behind Chiyu, her delicate frame swaying like a willow in the wind. The sight tugged at my heartstrings, let alone his. Brother Chi, is this my sister? Chiyu's gaze didn't waver. Instead, he declared with unabashed confidence, Schwer, rest assured. With me here, I will protect you. I shot Chiyu a withering glance and slowly stepped down from the sedan chair. I took a good look at this Miss Schwer. True to her name, she was clad entirely in pristine white, untouched by dust. To the uninitiated, she might have been mourning someone. Her delicate, unadorned face was so pale it looked whiter than mine after 3 days of death. The only ornament on her body was a single jade bracelet, luminous and smooth, adorning her wrist. It looked vaguely familiar. Ah, wasn't this the heirloom bracelet of the Chi family's matriarch? Chiyu, that uncouth brute, barely literate, always brandishing swords and spears. The women he fancies are either eloquent scholars or ethereal beauties who seem poised to ascend to heaven at any moment. Truly, people crave what they lack. But alas, Chiyu and I are cut from the same cloth. I'm vulgar. I adore bright red and crave gold. If my status didn't bar me from the battlefield, my military rank would surpass Chiyu's by now. Sister. Little White Lotus curtsied gracefully, her figure so supple it seemed watery. Before I could react, Chiyu's dead fish eyes fixed on me, his hand already shielding Little White Lotus's waist. Schwer, you're not well. No need for formalities. He then turned to me, Schwer carries my child. You two must coexist peacefully in the manor. Should anything happen to Schwer's child, I'll hold you personally accountable. I rolled my eyes dramatically. The stage isn't even set yet, and this scumbag and his whore are already acting out their soap opera. From the start until now, I haven't uttered a single word. These two's imagination is way too vivid. Their routine flows like water, as if they'd rehearsed it countless times on the road. I silently walked back to the carriage, gripped the curtain, and yanked it open. Show yourself, little darling. As the saying goes, matching outfits aren't scary, it's who looks worse that's embarrassing. Mu Baichin stepped out of the carriage and bowed to Chiyu. Both wore identical white robes, equally immaculate, with only a translucent jade pendant hanging at their waists. What a coincidence, that's my son-in-law's family heirloom. Though he's a man, in both bearing and looks, he outshines that Little White Lotus in every way. Baichin greets General Qi. After speaking, Mu Baichin obediently stepped back behind me. Chi stared at us in disbelief, forgetting even to shield the little white lotus. Hilarious. He can't seriously think he's the only one who can be cuckolded, right? You. Chi pointed at me, too furious for words. Today was supposed to be Chi-Yu's triumphant homecoming, with crowds already gathering in the streets. Ever since that little white lotus tried to intimidate me earlier, onlookers had started gawking. Throughout history, which hero hasn't had a few romantic escapades? By parading that little white lotus before me, Chi was clearly trying to coerce me into giving her a proper status in front of the people. Refuse, and I'd be seen as petty and jealous. Agree, and I'd disgust myself by enabling their fairy tale romance. His scheme was so transparent, I could hear it echoing all the way from Jiangnan. But who do you think I am? I am the esteemed princess of Nanyang. My father was the top scholar of his imperial examination, my mother the eldest princess. Do you truly believe I can be molded and twisted at will? Were my parents still alive, Chi would never have dared to set his sights on me. Chi, our Shin kingdom has its customs. Men may take concubines, noble ladies may keep attendants. I shall get along well enough with Shuer. But since Bai Chen grew up in Jiangnan and knows little of the capital, I must ask for your kindness in guiding her. These words were nothing short of rebellious, and the surrounding crowd immediately began pointing fingers at me. Such scenes were nothing new to me. At 15, I led troops alone to repel the mountain bandits who frequently raided the capital's outskirts. Back then, I was certain I'd return to the capital as a celebrated hero. Reality crushed my hopes. No one praised my valor in battle or my triumph over the bandits. All they cared about was whether my virtue remained intact, or if I'd resorted to some sordid dealings with the bandits. In that moment, I burned with rage, wanting to slaughter every one of those who spoke against me. My mother, however, reminded me that as a woman, choosing this path meant enduring far more criticism than any man. So now, I ignore these pointed remarks, standing tall and meeting Chi-Yu's gaze directly. Perhaps seeing my vulnerability, Mu Baichen's hand slipped out from his sleeve and gently clasped mine. Hidden within the wide sleeve, I quietly squeezed his palm, signaling that I was fine. Such humiliation had long ceased to faze me. Noble women could take concubines, a rule established by my mother's mother, the Empress Dowager. Yet across the entire Shin kingdom, few noble women dared to do so. My mother was one such case, though she dismissed her own harem after meeting my father. Now, I too count myself among them. General Qi, today marks your triumphant return to the capital. I have been dispatched by the emperor to welcome you. Why have you halted at the city gates? The official sent by the emperor to greet us had arrived unnoticed, likely having watched this farce unfold from within the crowd before stepping forward. Had Mu Baichen not emerged from my carriage earlier, he likely wouldn't have stepped in so soon to rescue Chiyu. For at that moment, the only one left in an awkward position was me. I shot him a glance, not even bothering to offer a courtesy, and led Mu Baichen away first. With Qi returning victorious, the emperor naturally planned a celebratory banquet in his honor. By all accounts, as the legitimate general's wife, I should have attended. But Chiyu never returned to the general's residence. He took that little white lotus straight to the palace. By the time word reached me, the feast was already halfway through. The eunuch who delivered the message trembled as he invited me to the palace, fearing my wrath might spill over onto him. After all, my reputation before marriage wasn't exactly pristine. I told the eunuch to wait, then changed into a crimson gown guaranteed to outshine everyone present. My beauty was inherited from my mother. While others might find the gaudy red and gold garb vulgar, I alone could pull it off. Bai Chen, accompany me to the palace. Mu Baichen adjusted my palace sash and flashed me a smile. For Nanyang's request, Baichen would brave mountains of blades and seas of fire without hesitation. His smile nearly blinded me. In that instant, I understood why Chiyu had been so utterly captivated by that little white lotus. Who could resist that? Midway through the banquet, after several cups of wine, Chiyu was about to ask the emperor for a reward, a title for his little white lotus, when I arrived with Mu Baichen to crash the party. Uncle Emperor, to hold a banquet in the palace without so much as informing Nanyang? I've come unannounced to beg a cup of wine, surely you won't refuse? The moment I appeared, the once bustling hall fell deathly silent. My beauty must have blinded them all. I was thoroughly pleased with my entrance. Seeing me arrive, both the emperor and Chiyu wore expressions of awkwardness. But the emperor was the emperor after all. Spotting me, he immediately gestured for me to sit. Not at all. Nanyang's arrival is most timely. Today marks General Qi's triumphant return, a joyous occasion for you as well. Quickly, prepare a seat for the princess. Ha ha ha. Just moments ago, General Qi was pleading for rewards from this emperor. Before he could finish, you arrived. Since you and General Qi are one in marriage, if there's anything you desire, speak freely to this emperor. I smiled faintly. General Qi must have been asking Uncle Emperor for a formal recognition of Sister Shui's status. This is a joyous occasion. Coincidentally, Nanyang also has a matter of celebration to request Uncle's favor. Wouldn't it be even better for the general's residence to have double good fortune? The emperor chuckled heartily at my words. Well said, Nanyang girl. Now, tell me, what is this joyous matter? I raised my hand, fingers intertwined with Mu Baichen's, and declared, since General Qi and Snowy are mutually devoted and seek recognition, and Nanyang has also fallen head over heels for Baichen at first sight, Imperial Uncle ought to grant Baichen a proper status as well. The moment these words left my lips, I could practically hear the collective gasp of the ministers in the hall. Even the emperor's smile froze on his face. Qiyu, humiliated before everyone, flushed crimson with fury, glaring at me. This. Nanyang, do you have any other demands? The emperor clearly had no intention of granting my request. I replied, Your Majesty, Nanyang desires nothing more. Fine. 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 The emperor's 3 consecutive fines made it clear my refusal to back down had infuriated him. Meeting his fury head-on, I declared, Your Majesty, Nanyang's mother once taught me that when you meet someone you love, only bold pursuit leaves no regrets. Before she passed, she entrusted me with her wish that I live this life without regret. Kneeling on the ground, my spine remained rigidly straight. This too was my mother's lesson, knees may bend, but the backbone must never yield. By invoking my mother's name, the emperor, however furious, could no longer harm me. After all, his throne itself was secured through my mother's tireless efforts to rally support. And once he ascended, it was my mother's vigilance at the frontier that kept the barbarian tribes at bay. Before my mother passed, she specifically entrusted the emperor to treat me well. Yet barely years after her death, he shoved me into the general's residence, all to prolong his own grip on the dragon throne. Guilt-ridden, he dared not face me. After my marriage, he seldom summoned me to the palace. He never once asked how I fared in the Qi household. To outsiders, this signaled that I, the princess, had fallen from favor. When I mentioned my mother, the emperor's expression shifted as expected, yet he still flared with anger at my insolence. Attendants, proclaimed the decree. Qiyu's beloved Shuai was granted the status of co-wife as she'd wished. But before she could savor a single moment of joy, Mu Baichen became my husband, equal in rank to Qiyu. If you ask me, this marriage between Qiyu and me is truly unprecedented and unparalleled. That fair-faced little white lotus twisted his features into a grimace more hideous than the white ghost. Qiyu's expression wasn't much better either. As a princess and a member of the imperial family, even if court officials wished to gossip, they'd have to find a secluded spot to whisper. Qiyu, however, was a different story. Especially those literati officials who'd long disliked him. By tomorrow morning, my imperial uncle's desk would surely be piled with memorials accusing him. In that case, Nanyang shall not disturb your pleasure any longer. With that, I led Mu Baichen out. Passing by Qiyu and Little White Lotus, I waved the imperial decree triumphantly. Your highnesses may join my wedding feast once you return to the mansion. Back at the mansion, servants were already preparing the bridal chamber, arranged by Qiyu, who likely intended to consummate his marriage with Little White Lotus the moment he secured the decree. But sorry, today is my special day too. First come, first served, this bridal chamber is mine to claim. Seems Qiyu truly cares for this Little White Lotus. For a mere secondary wife, his preparations surpass even our grand wedding. He'd even prepared a full set of wedding attire. I picked up the men's set and held it against Mu Baichen. He was about Qiyu's height but slimmer. Though Chiyu is scum, his muscles were forged on the battlefield, something a scholar like Mu Baichin could never match. TSK, way too big. I tossed the suit aside in disgust and said to Mu Baichin, on your wedding night, I didn't even prepare a proper wedding outfit for you. My apologies. Mu Baichin merely smiled, clasping my hand. Being by Gigi's side is all I ever wanted. I chuckled. My full name is Shen Qingyun, with the title Nanyang. Gigi is my childhood nickname, only my parents and grandfather still call me that. After overhearing my grandfather use it once, he too began calling me Gigi without fail. Jiangnan abounds with scholars, and Mu Baichin was my grandfather's most outstanding student. This time, he volunteered to accompany me back to the capital. I picked up the ceremonial wine from the table and offered a cup to Mu Baichin. Meeting his eyes, as bright and beautiful as the starry sky, I said, I'll give you only one chance to regret this. Mu Baichin took the cup, wrapping his arm around mine. I would die 9 times without regret. With that, he drained the cup in one gulp. I did the same. Just as Mu Baichin and I were about to retire, a commotion arose outside the door. My maid, Chuya, then announced, the princess has commanded that tonight, being the newlyweds' first night together, no one may disturb you, not even the general. The princess has prepared a bridal chamber for the general and Lady Shui in the side courtyard. Please proceed there. Chiyu's curses grew fainter and fainter, and I couldn't help but laugh out loud under the covers. I truly adored how he disliked me yet couldn't do a thing about it. Mu Baichin had been frail since childhood. An old Taoist once divined that he must be raised as a girl from infancy, so the Grim Reaper sent to claim his life would be deceived. His hair, especially, must never be cut unless absolutely necessary. Thus, his hair grew longer than most women's. To prevent it from tangling while sleeping, he bound it into a long, twisted braid at the nape of his neck. I played with his braid in my hands, drifting off to sleep without realizing it. Vaguely, I sensed the person beside me had gotten up to do something. I only heard the red candles by the bedside sputter twice. When I opened my eyes again, it was already daylight. Since my mother passed away, I rarely slept through the night. For some reason, this night had been unusually peaceful. Mu Baichin was already up, sitting by the window engrossed in a book. He wore his usual white robes, his long hair gathered by a silk ribbon, the end still slightly curled. Noticing I was awake, he set down his book and came to help me rise. I chuckled, what husband would serve his wife in rising? Such things are best left to the maids. Mu Baichin's ears flushed slightly, yet his hands, adjusting my collar, did not pause. After I finished dressing and washing, I led Mu Baichin to the front hall for breakfast. To my surprise, Chiyu and Little White Lotus were already waiting there. Chiyu's face was as dark as ink, and Little White Lotus's expression wasn't much better. Seems last night's wedding night didn't go so well. Spotting us, Little White Lotus immediately curtsied and said, Please forgive me, sister. Upon entering the manor yesterday, Schwer should have presented tea to you as custom dictates. That's why we've come to disturb you so early. I raised an eyebrow. This wasn't disturbing anyone, they were clearly here to put on a show. I glanced at Mu Baichin beside me, then sat down in the main seat next to Chiyu. Then serve it, I said. The tea was brought quickly, but there were 2 cups. Xiao Bailian froze for a moment. Mu Baichin stepped forward, picked up 1 cup, and offered it to Chiyu first. This cup of tea is from Baichin to General Qi. I almost clapped for Mu Baichin in my mind. I looked at the hesitant Little White Lotus and said, Weren't you supposed to offer tea to me? Little White Lotus bit her lip, took the other cup, and handed it to me. This cup of tea, Schwer offers to sister. I crossed my arms and looked at Chiyu defiantly, implying, if you won't accept it, neither will I. Mu Baichin was, after all, a man. Holding a cup of tea wasn't exactly taxing. Little White Lotus, however, was a different story. She was a delicate little white flower to begin with, and she was carrying a child. After holding it for just a moment, she began to sway precariously. Chiyu couldn't bear to see Little White Lotus struggle. He practically snatched the cup from Mu Baichin's hand, downed it in 1 gulp, then glared at me with fury. I had someone take the tea from Little White Lotus's hands. I blew away the foam on the surface, sipped it leisurely twice, then slipped a bracelet off my wrist and had it handed to little White Lotus. As the newcomer to the estate, I should naturally serve the general diligently. But now that I'm carrying his child, my foremost duty is to bear him a son. Xiao Bailian accepted the bracelet and looked to Chiyu for help. I feigned surprise. On Bai Chen's first day in the manor, could it be the general hadn't prepared a welcome gift? That would be most improper of you. After all, Bai Chen was brought here by imperial decree. I took her into the manor openly and legitimately. Even if you're displeased, you ought to at least maintain appearances. Chiyu's face flushed crimson with fury as he glared at me, gnashing his teeth. Shin Qingyun, don't push your luck. I continued to fan the flames. How can General Qi's magnanimity fall short of mine, a mere woman of the inner quarters? You abandoned your lawful wife shortly after your wedding, that is unkind. You kept a concubine behind my back, that is unrighteous. Even so, I treated Shuer and her child kindly. How can you bear to see Bai Chen? How dare you? Qiyu slammed his palm onto the table, instantly cracking the fine rosewood surface. I refused to be outdone, shouting toward the door, Chuya, prepare the carriage for the palace. It seems General Qi is deeply displeased with His Majesty's imperial decree yesterday. This princess shall enter the palace immediately to request the emperor revoke his command. The little White Lotus, ever adept at reading the room, piped up, General, if sister objects to Shuer's status, then Shuer would gladly become a slave or a maid. Qiyu declared, Shuer, you needn't humble yourself. Today I shall enter the palace with this venomous woman. Even if it costs me all my military honors, I will divorce her. But no sooner had he spoken than Mu Baichen interjected, Baichen knows he is but a commoner, utterly unworthy of the princess. I only wish to remain by your side, content to be nameless and unrecognized. Who doesn't know how to feign deep affection? I immediately walked over to Mu Baichen and took his hand. Baichen, you needn't belittle yourself. In my eyes, that brute is utterly unworthy of comparison to you. Today, I enter the palace, and even if it means losing my title as princess, I will divorce that wretch. The four of us knelt side by side in the emperor's study. Upon hearing our purpose, the emperor flew into a rage, flinging the memorial he held directly between me and Qiyu. Nonsense! Didn't each of you beg me yesterday to issue the decree? What do you take me for, a 3-year-old child? He pointed at the pile of memorials on the table. From dawn till now, do you know how many accusations against you I've received? General Qi, I gave you the princess as your wife, is this how you treat her? Do you even acknowledge this emperor? The emperor's gaze swept over the delicate, White Lotus-like figure kneeling behind Qiyu, settling on her belly. The sight made her breathing grow ragged with fear. And you! The emperor pointed at me. I married you to the general so you could manage the household affairs and allow General Qi to focus on the battlefield. Yet you went and burned down the entire rear courtyard. Look at your actions. How many women in this world are as frivolous and wanton as you? I rolled my eyes inwardly. If you'd sent me to the frontier, that border would be far more peaceful than it is now. A few barbarians, yet they dare repeatedly provoke the borders of our great Yijia dynasty. I'd have their homelands ransacked. Too bad this dog emperor doesn't dare. After the dog emperor finished, he turned to Mu Baichen behind me. Mu Baichen kept his head bowed, his face hidden from the emperor's view. The emperor's gaze shifted to Mu Baichen. Is this your first time in the capital? Your Majesty, this humble subject has always lived in Jiangnan. This is indeed my first visit to the capital. Mu Baichen's reply was neither humble nor arrogant, flawless in every way. The emperor, frustrated by the lack of the answer he craved and thoroughly irritated by both of us, cursed me and Qiyu out before banishing us back to the general's mansion. The mansion was divided into eastern and western courtyards, separated by a central lake. Qiyu and I used the lake as our demarcation line, each occupying one courtyard. Qiyu, humph. Me, ha. Since Qiyu and Little White Lotus weren't coming to annoy me, I couldn't be bothered with them either. After all, I had my own matters to attend to. Though Little White Lotus stopped bothering me, she certainly didn't stop causing trouble. She hosted several banquets at the general's mansion in Qiyu's name, acting as if she were the mistress of the house. Naturally, the nobles in the capital had heard about the absurd affair between Chiyu and me, and each of them was itching to come and join the fun. The constant hammering and banging from the courtyard next door made our side seem all the more bleak and desolate. Mu Baichen's health had never been robust, and after autumn arrived, he fell ill intermittently. He'd been cooped up indoors for nearly half a month, but today I dragged him out for a stroll in the garden. I leaned against the lakeside railing feeding the fish while Mu Baichen sat quietly beside me reading. The sound of opera singing drifted over from next door. I tossed the last piece of fish food into the lake. "Staying with me in this cold, lonely place, don't you find it boring?" I asked. Mu Baichen set down his book, his gaze drifting across the lake. He shook his head. "Being with Gigi is enough for me." I smiled, my eyes catching a glimpse of a sleeve fluttering on the porch across the way. "Baichen, I'd like to feed the fish while eating chestnut cakes." "All right." Mu Baichen went to fetch the chestnut cakes. Sure enough, the moment he left, little White Lotus appeared. "Sister, the general has ordered Schwer to host a banquet, hoping to introduce Schwer to the ladies of the capital. Schwer's status is nowhere near yours, and I may have overlooked some etiquette. I'd like to invite you to attend and offer some guidance." I remained silent, quietly watching little White Lotus perform. "Sister, I never meant to compete with you for the general's favor. It's just that now I'm carrying his child, so he's shown me a little more attention." With that, she took my hand in a self-assuredly intimate gesture. I raised an eyebrow. "And?" Seeing I wasn't angry, little White Lotus grew a bit flustered. She placed my hand on her belly. "Sister, feel it. The baby's been moving quite a lot lately." I pulled my hand away, thinking it was about time. Why weren't the extras here yet? This play was getting boring. Seeing my continued indifference, as if I couldn't be bothered, little White Lotus gritted her teeth and dropped the act. "You think being a princess makes you special? The general has already told me, once I bear him a son, the entire general's residence will be mine to manage." Footsteps finally echoed from the porch. My heart leapt, they were finally here. "General, Lady Xue just went to fetch the princess, but she's being unreasonable. She insists Lady Xue kneel before she'll come. Lady Xue is unwell and carrying a child, please save her." Hearing the footsteps, little White Lotus instantly adopted a pitiful expression. "Sister, Schwer is so sorry." With that, she lunged toward the lake. Too bad, my reflexes were quick. I grabbed her arm. "What are you doing, little sister? How could you kneel before me while carrying a child?" The maidservant had already led Chiyu and the guests past the porch. Little White Lotus, held fast by me, couldn't move an inch. Her little face twisted in frustration. Just then, Chiyu, who had just passed through the porch, collided with Mu Baichen, who was carrying a tray of chestnut cakes. Chiyu had spotted me and little White Lotus from afar. Now, having bumped into Mu Baichen, the two exchanged words. Chiyu suddenly knocked the chestnut cakes out of Mu Baichen's hands. Plop! "Someone's fallen in." I yanked Xiaobalian away and rushed to Chiyu's side, delivering a sharp slap across his face. Then, turning to the bewildered guards behind me, I barked, "What are you standing around for? Hurry and save him. If anything happens to Baichen, you'll all be buried with him." For a moment, not only Xiaobalian and Chiyu froze, but even the crowd of guests called over to watch the commotion stood stunned. Mu Baichen was quickly pulled out by the guards. I pulled him into my arms. It was late autumn, and the lake water was bone-chillingly cold. Mu Baichen was shivering violently, his face as pale as paper. "Gee. Chestnut cake." I clasped his trembling hand. "We'll have chestnut cake next time." Mu Baichen forced a smile at me, squeezing my palm. Only then did I remember my lines. I turned to Chiyu, eyes red with fury. "Chiyu, I've endured you bringing random women home. Baichen has always kept his distance from you. What more do you want? As a general, can't you even tolerate this much?" Chiyu had been frozen in shock since earlier. The words he should have spoken now came from my mouth. I watched Chiyu fall speechless. "How does it feel? The dagger meant for me has stabbed you instead. Not a pleasant taste, is it?" This move might be a bit underhanded, but it won't truly harm Chiyu. At worst, people will mock him a little. Once he wins his next battle, he'll be a hero again. Had it been little White Lotus pushed into the river today, I would have cemented my reputation as a vicious, jealous woman. The emperor already harbors distrust toward the Qi family. If little White Lotus had miscarried today, my position as a princess would have been in grave jeopardy. Heaven is truly unfair. The guests departed, thoroughly satisfied after witnessing today's spectacle. I helped Mu Baichen back to his chambers, where the court physician was promptly summoned. As Mu Baichen lay on the bed, the physician took his pulse. Only then did I realize my own hands were trembling violently. My cold gaze swept over Qiyu and little White Lotus behind me. Startled by my stare, little White Lotus shrank into Qiyu's embrace. If anything happens to Baichen today, I, Shen Qingyun, will risk losing this princess title to demand justice from the emperor. Shen Qingyun, don't push it. I never touched him. A grown man resorting to such underhanded tricks, the sort used by women in the inner quarters, is utterly shameless. Smack! I slapped Qiyu again. The half of his face I'd struck earlier was still swollen, and now the other half was bruised and puffy too. You dare speak of harem intrigues, General Qi? If it hadn't been Baichen falling today, but your own Schwer, would you still believe I never touched her? Oh, right. Miss Schwer would never dare frame a princess herself. She'd surely report her plans to you first. You. Exposed by my words, Qiyu flew into a rage, reaching out to strike me. But his hand froze midair as I seized it with an iron grip. Ah! A piercing cry escaped Qiyu as his wrist went limp and dangled limply. I flung his hand away and addressed little White Lotus, "Take your general back to rest properly. Tomorrow I'll enter the palace to see His Majesty. Whatever you have to say can wait until you speak before the emperor." Qiyu glared at me with a swollen face, looking utterly ridiculous. Intimidated by my authority, little White Lotus dared not utter a word. She helped Qiyu slink back to their courtyard. Mu Baichen's condition wasn't looking good. After taking his pulse, the court physician shook his head. He said it was a congenital ailment, that Mu Baichen had always been frail, and now, having caught a chill, recovery seemed unlikely. After seeing the physician off, I sat by Mu Baichen's bedside. I smoothed the disheveled hair from his forehead. He'd started running a fever earlier and was now unconscious. Gazing at his pallid face, I thought perhaps I shouldn't have brought him to the capital. He should have remained in Jiangnan, content as the radiant and distinguished young Master Baichen. Why drag himself into this mess with me? I must admit, Mu Baichen, I regret it. His fever raged all night, and I stayed by his side through it. As dawn approached, his fever finally broke. I summoned Chuye to help me dress and apply makeup. She startled when she entered. After staying up all night, my complexion was dreadfully pale. She layered on thick powder to barely conceal my exhaustion. Mu Baichen still slept, but at least the fever had broken. I instructed Chuye to tend to him and entered the palace alone. I knelt outside the emperor's study for 2 full hours before he finally summoned me inside. As I rose, my knees buckled. A palace maid nearby reached out to support me, but I waved her away. Limping into the study, I found the emperor's expression grim. He flung a memorial before me. "Nanyang, I have truly spoiled you." It seemed the events at the general's residence yesterday had reached the emperor's ears early this morning. I drew a deep breath, my eyes instantly welling with tears. "Uncle, is this truly how you see Nanyang? Uncle." I crawled forward on my knees 2 steps, scraping against his desk. "If it were Qiyu kneeling before you today, accusing me of harming his child, whom would you believe, him or me? If Baichen had never existed, how would you punish Nanyang today?" The emperor was rendered speechless by my 2 questions, swallowing the words he had intended to speak. Yet, the dignity of the Son of Heaven compelled him to admonish me. "Nanyang, you are a princess. No matter how grave your offense, what could your uncle possibly do to you?" The implication was clear. I should not have fought back, I should have endured. But why should I endure? The late emperor's decree clearly named my mother as the heir to the throne. What kind of useless prince would make the late emperor choose my mother to inherit the throne when there were male heirs available? My grandfather, the late emperor's tutor, personally witnessed the late emperor write that will. Days before the late emperor's demise, the current emperor, then still a prince, imprisoned all court physicians and surrounded the late emperor's chambers with his troops. This dog of an emperor possesses no other skill but treachery. With factions still unstable, my mother traveled tirelessly to pacify the tribes. Had this incompetent not hindered her progress, seizing the throne while she was away from the capital and hastily forcing the palace coup, he would have been forced to send her to the remote frontier to clean up his mess after his coronation. To save my parents' lives, my grandfather hid the genuine imperial edict and forged one proclaiming him emperor. After his coronation, he resigned his post and returned to his hometown. Had I not journeyed back to Jiangnan to visit relatives, I might never have learned these truths. And my mother, she labored for this man until her dying breath. To this day, I find it impossible to feel any reverence for the man who sits upon that throne. He stole the life that rightfully belonged to my mother. And as long as I live in this world, I will constantly remind him that he is nothing but an illegitimate thief. It turns out, from the very beginning, all he ever wanted was for me to die. Cold sweat broke out on my back, but having come this far, I had no choice. He killed my parents and felt guilty toward me. Yet he fears me too. After all, my mother raised me single-handedly, and by 15 I commanded troops against bandits. After my parents died, my grandfather intended to take me back to Jiangnan. But the emperor, citing the anxiety of having his only kin far from his side, kept me in the capital. This was clearly holding me hostage in the capital to threaten my grandfather. Each year, my grandfather secretly sent me a letter home, always bearing the same 4 characters: conceal your talents, bide your time. The emperor cannot kill me yet. After all, he has always been weak, with few political achievements to his name. If he were to kill the orphan of my elder sister, who once devoted her life to him, he would leave himself with even less of a good reputation. After all, it had been barely 3 years since my mother passed, and already the barbarians at the border were stirring restlessly, frequently harassing our border towns. He knows he lacks my mother's resolve. In just 3 short years, he sent away no fewer than 5 princesses for political marriages. His own line is thin. All these years since ascending the throne, he hasn't sired a single heir. Thus, most of the princesses sent away are daughters of officials and powerful families. Dissatisfaction already runs high in the court, and Chiyu is the most formidable warrior among his generation. He dared not offend Chiyu, yet he could do little to me. Thus, the outcome of my tearful plea in the study was a 50-50 split of the punishment. I was confined to my quarters for a month, while Chiyu had his salary docked for half a year. Naturally, most of his military authority was also stripped away. When Chiyu attended court the next day and learned his command had been revoked, his face twisted with rage. The moment he returned to his residence, he sought me out to settle the score. I glanced at his plaster-cast right hand and sneered, "If the general wishes to lose both hands, he's welcome to try." I blew on the ink that hadn't dried on the paper before me. If the general finds himself with nothing better to do, he might copy sutras like I do. Battlefields breed too much bloodlust. Copying sutras helps dispel that malevolent energy. Chi stared at me in disbelief, as if astonished that such brazen audacity existed in this world. "Chiu Yi, see our guest out." After Chiu departed, I sipped my tea leisurely and addressed Mu Baichen, who was furiously scribbling at his desk. "Stop copying. The emperor punished me with 100 copies. How long do you plan to keep at it? You've just recovered, don't push yourself." Mu Baichen set down his brush, pressed his fist to his lips, and cleared his throat twice before smiling. "Is Gigi worried about me?" I walked over to him with exaggerated grace, taking his hand. "Of course. Look how red your hand is from writing. How could I not be concerned?" A flush spread across Mu Baichen's pale face as he turned away, slightly uncomfortable. I shamelessly leaned in closer. "What's the matter? Feeling shy? You're my legally wedded husband. For you, I became the first princess in history to outshine her husband and outshine her consort. Those historians have long disliked me. I can't wait to see how they spin my story. Does the princess care so much about the world's judgment?" Mu Baichen had wrapped his arm around my waist without me noticing, one hand resting on my head, gently smoothing my hair. I shrugged. Like I give a damn. If I did, I wouldn't be Shin Qingyun. Mu Baichen smiled but said nothing more. After this ordeal, Chiyu and Little White Lotus finally settled down. After all, they couldn't control me, they'd hurt the enemy 800 times over, only to wound themselves 1,000 times more. Lately, though, a new storybook has been circulating in the capital. The protagonist is none other than myself, Shen Qingyun, Princess of Nanyang. Assuming some busybody had written it to slander me, I had Chuya buy me a copy. I flipped it open and froze. This was a fanfic written by some devoted admirer. The story portrayed me as heaven's favored daughter, peerlessly valiant, from my childhood brawls with spoiled brats to leading troops against bandits at 15. It was practically my own biography. Illustrated throughout with concise language, the tale was accessible even to illiterate women and children. No wonder it spread like wildfire across the capital. Yet my own legendary and heroic biography abruptly ends in the year of my marriage. The story concludes with my wedding to Chiyu. Oh, it doesn't even mention Chiyu's name before stopping. I found this rather disappointing, so I decided to have a heart-to-heart with the author himself. I pushed open Mu Baichen's door, book in hand. Snatching it from his grasp, I thrust the storybook back at him. Why did you stop writing after my wedding year? Mu Baichen didn't glance at the storybook in his hands, only fixed his gaze on me. His stare made me feel uneasy, so I composed myself. Fortunately, Chuya's announcement interrupted my awkwardness. Princess, Lady Shui requests an audience. Xiao Balian? What could she possibly want with me? Has life become too comfortable? Regardless, I'll deal with whatever comes my way. I instructed Xiao Yi to bring her in. The moment Xiao Balian entered, she knelt before me with a thud. Sister, I beg you, save Shui. A distinct handprint still marred Xiao Balian's face, clearly the work of that scoundrel Chiyu. Though I never cared much for Little White Lotus, Chiyu striking a pregnant woman was utterly despicable. Angry as I was, I had no desire to meddle in their affairs. This is between you and General Qi, I stated. I cannot intervene. At my words, Little White Lotus's face drained of color, turning ashen. Then she began banging her head against the floor with a clang, clang, clang. The force was so intense it seemed she might shatter the floorboards. Please, Princess, save the child in Shui's womb. Princess, Shui knows she has wronged you, but the child is innocent. If only the child can be born safely, Shui is willing to raise it under your name. Shui willingly enter a convent and spend the rest of her days in the company of ancient Buddhas and flickering lamps. I had little interest in the child in Little White Lotus's womb, but her expression seemed genuine. Besides, I had no inclination to torment a pregnant woman. I quickly had her supported and seated. Tell me what happened. Xiao Bialian glanced at Mu Baichen standing beside me, hesitating to speak. I said, Baichen is my man. Speak freely. Xiao Bialian composed herself before recounting her story. Xiao Bialian's surname was Jiang, her full name Jiang Yingxue. The Jiang surname was rare indeed. 5 years ago, when the new emperor ascended the throne, the entire Jiang family in the capital was executed. All the women were exiled. To put it bluntly, back then, not even a dog bearing the Jiang surname remained in the capital. The reason? Treason. Whether it was real or fabricated, who truly cared about the truth? So, Chiyu discovered your identity and wanted to kill you? Yes. The Little White Lotus replied meekly. Then how did Chiyu discover your identity? How did you come to know him in the frontier? Our entire clan was exiled to the frontier. Many of the elderly, women, and children perished along the way. Only my mother told me that our Jiang family had been wrongfully accused. She urged me to return to the capital and clear our family's name. But how could a fragile woman like me possibly accomplish that? Later, for reasons unknown, Mother suddenly found a peasant family. She had me pose as their daughter. From that day on, Jiang Yingxue of the Jiang clan died, and I washed away my identity to become a peasant girl. The rest of the story is rather cliched. Jiang Yingxue saved Chiyu, they fell in love, and she seized the opportunity to return to the capital. I sighed and asked, when you returned to the capital, did you ever consider avenging your family? Jiang Yingxue shook her head. General Qi treated me wonderfully at first. I even bore his child. I thought, if I could return to the capital and live peacefully with the general, I'd forget the past and abandon thoughts of revenge. I clicked my tongue and whispered to Mu Baichin beside me, "TSK tisk TSK. Love-struck minds are dangerous." Mu Baichin sat quietly beside me, letting me clasp his hand and play with it. Jiang Yingxue clearly heard my words. Her entire body stiffened, then she began to cry again. The general stormed back to the mansion a few days ago and immediately revealed my true identity. If not for his consideration of my child, I might already be. Today, I slipped out secretly while the general was away. "Princess, I was wrong about everything before. Please, in your generosity, save my child." I sighed. Truthfully, I'd never truly cared about Jiang Yingxue. I knew most of her schemes were orchestrated by Qiyu. In essence, she was a victim too. Watching her tear-streaked face, I realized this was the first time I'd truly looked at this woman. Her face felt eerily familiar. She bore an uncanny resemblance to Qiyu's beloved, the one I'd beaten apart. The legitimate daughter of the Chancellor's household. Didn't Qiyu have a childhood sweetheart they nearly married, only for the Emperor to tear them apart? So he still harbors unresolved feelings and found himself a substitute? But I wouldn't burden Jiang Yingxue with this cruel truth, she was already pitiful enough. I promised to protect her and her child, then had Xiuyi escort her home for proper care. This was also a chance to test my subordinates. I summoned them and ordered them to investigate who Qiyu had been meeting lately. They worked swiftly. Detailed reports soon arrived, Qiyu's whereabouts, associates, and activities over the past days. Sure enough, among those he'd frequently met was his childhood sweetheart, Lu Ying. It seemed Jiang Yingshue's true identity must have been uncovered through her. I snorted coldly. I wasn't naive enough to believe this was merely a rekindled romance between the two. This was the legitimate daughter of the Chancellor's household, with no afflictions to speak of. Why would they allow their own daughter to remain an old maid? To suggest the Chancellor's household and the Qi family had no collusion, I found that utterly implausible. Previously, I was merely a powerless orphaned girl. But on this trip back to Jiangnan to visit relatives, my grandfather gave me my mother's token. With this token, I contacted my mother's former subordinates. With manpower at my disposal, things became much easier. I ordered my men to keep a close watch on Qiyu and the Chancellor's residence, reporting back to me at the slightest sign of trouble. After arranging these matters, I considered approaching the Emperor with a reason to bring my mother's former subordinates out into the open. Mother's former troops were her own private army, disbanded after her death. All these years, they've operated in secret. Now that they've followed me to the capital, they can't remain hidden forever. Seeing me deep in thought, Mu Baichin asked, "Is something troubling you, Gigi?" I twirled a strand of his long hair around my finger and replied, "I'm just troubled by how to arrange mother's former troops." Mu Baichin chuckled, stepping in front of me. "I've heard the Princess of Nanyang is peerlessly valiant. At 15, you led troops to wipe out bandits surrounding the capital." I burst out laughing, rising to pinch his cheek. "Ah Chen, you truly are my wise and capable partner." Before long, a band of mountain bandits suddenly emerged near the capital, claiming a mountain as their stronghold. When this news reached the Emperor, it naturally caused widespread panic. Yet these bandits hadn't committed any real crimes, merely occupying a mountain peak, neither burning nor killing, nor plundering. The Emperor was a coward at heart. Since the bandits hadn't caused trouble, he simply ignored them. Qiyu petitioned several times to lead troops against them, but the Emperor rejected his requests each time. At some point, a rumor began circulating in the capital. The bandits remained quiet out of fear of the Princess of Nanyang, who resided in the city. After all, my reputation for leading troops against bandits at the age of 15 was well known, and for a time, many commoners actually believed it. Meanwhile, I was in my residence receiving reports from my subordinates. Wang Chui, whom I had personally promoted, now disguised himself as the steward of an external shop under my name for operational convenience. This man possessed considerable skill and a ruthless streak. Within a mere month, he had thoroughly uncovered the inner workings of both the Chancellor's residence and the Qi family. Scanning the intelligence on the paper, I noted their ambitions were quite large. They seemed unafraid of overextending themselves. Just as I was burning the letters one by one, Jiang Yingshua's personal maid suddenly rushed in, kneeling before me with a thud. "Please, princess, save my mistress. She went into labor today, but General Qi refuses to summon the family physician. He intends to let her die of exhaustion." My brow furrowed. Qiyu, that bastard, had struck so early. I ordered Wang Qi, "Take my token to the palace and summon the imperial physician. Say this princess is unwell. Upon returning, go straight to the West Wing." Wang Qi, receiving my command, wasted no time in fetching the physician. Accompanied by my maidservant and guards, I stormed directly into the West Wing. The moment I entered, I heard Jiang Yingshua's agonized screams. Maids knelt scattered across the courtyard floor, while Qiyu sat in the center. That beastly creature! Qiyu clearly hadn't expected me to intervene in his affairs, his expression betraying surprise at my presence. Without a word, I seized his arm and wrenched it out of its socket. Qiyu let out a piercing scream. My guards immediately subdued him. Ignoring the old maids blocking the doorway, I charged straight into Jiang Yingshua's birthing chamber. Seeing me, a faint smile finally touched Jiang Yingshua's pale face. "Princess. Don't speak. Save your strength." I stuffed a slice of ginseng into her mouth. "Princess. Save the child. The child bears the Jiang surname. Clear the Jiang family's wrongful accusation." Jiang Yingxua practically squeezed these words out, her entire body drenched in sweat. I gripped one of her hands. "The imperial physician will arrive soon. I promise to protect you. You and the child will be fine. Now, squeeze my hand hard." "Ah." Accompanied by Jiang Yingshua's piercing scream, I never imagined the seemingly delicate little white flower possessed such strength. I felt my entire arm might snap from her grip. Wang Qi acted swiftly, practically carrying the imperial physician into the mansion. Fortunately, Jiang Yingshua's pregnancy had progressed well. After the physician arrived, she delivered a healthy baby girl without complications. Jiang Yingxua was utterly drained, watching weakly as I cradled the child in my arms. "Princess, for saving my life, I have no way to repay you. This child shall serve you from now on." I chuckled softly. "That's quite the scheme, making me raise your child for free." As Jiang Yingxua spoke, Wang Qi, standing behind me, suddenly jerked his head up, staring straight at Jiang Yingxua lying on the bed. "Schwerer." Hearing her name called, Jiang Yingxua finally noticed Wang Qi standing behind me. Tears instantly filled her eyes. "Brother." Wang Qi, his name contained the character for Jiang. I carried the baby out to the outer room, leaving the two siblings alone to catch up. Mu Baichen had been waiting outside. I hadn't woken him from his afternoon nap. I glanced outside. Night had fallen completely. Unable to bear watching me awkwardly hold the child, Mu Baichen stepped forward and took the baby into his arms. Watching his practiced skill at soothing the baby, I couldn't help but smirk. "Seeing how skilled you are, you haven't been having kids behind my back, have you?" Mu Baichen's ears instantly flushed crimson. "Absolutely not," he protested softly. Before long, Wang Qi emerged from the inner room. She looked as though she'd just finished crying. Mu Baichen carried the child out, leaving me facing Wang Qi, who knelt before me. "Can you speak now?" Wang Qi, originally named Jiang Yingxian, was the eldest son of the Jiang family. The Jiang family had been loyal to my mother. No wonder the new emperor's first act upon ascending the throne was to execute every member of the Jiang family. It severed my mother's right arm. Perhaps my mother wasn't entirely unaware of the succession plot. For the place where the Jiang family was exiled was precisely where my mother later took up her post. It seemed likely that the person who helped Jiang Yingxua change her identity back then was also my mother. Sure enough, Wang Qi's words confirmed my suspicions. During the Jiang family's exile, the eldest princess escorted them all the way. But the new emperor, ever cautious, sent numerous assassins. Fearing the princess would be exposed, my parents begged her to protect us siblings. After she sent us away, my parents and clan members, I never thought I'd see my little sister again in this lifetime. By this point, Wang Qi was sobbing uncontrollably. He then solemnly kowtowed to me several times. "My sister has already recounted her ordeal. I humbly ask for your forgiveness, princess. My sister and I have sworn to serve you with unwavering loyalty, ready to brave fire and water for you. I sighed and instructed Wang Shui to stay at the residence these next few days to care for Jiang Yingxue. Mu Baichen handed the child to the wet nurse and waited outside the door. Seeing me emerge, he hurriedly draped the large cloak he held in his hands over my shoulders. I told him, "You should go back first. The scene ahead might be a bit bloody." Mu Baichen shook his head. "I said I'd follow you through fire and water. I'll be with you no matter what." I squeezed his cold hand. "Why didn't you wear more layers yourself?" Mu Baichen followed me to the woodshed where Chiyu was held. He had been subdued by my men, bound, and thrown into the shed. Spotting me enter, Chiyu stared at me coldly from the shadows. "When did you replace the guards at my estate?" I arched an eyebrow. "You noticed." "Not long ago, when I returned from visiting relatives." Mu Baichen produced a candle from somewhere, silently lit it, and stood behind me as I faced off against Chiyu. "I underestimated you," Chiyu sneered coldly before closing his eyes, refusing to speak further. "Very well," I murmured. "It seems General Qi knows exactly what I intend to do next." Truthfully, I hadn't planned to act so soon, but today I learned of my mother's past, the annihilation of the Jiang family. The blade in my hand could no longer be sharpened slowly. Back then, in the Jiang family massacre, both the Qi family and the Chancellor seemed to have played significant roles, didn't they? Let me guess. Why did you specifically choose Jiang Yingxue, who resembles Lu Yingying? Why did you interfere during her childbirth? Lu Yingying already told you Jiang Yingxue's identity, but I imagine you knew it even when you were at the frontier. The Chancellor has a big appetite, but yours, Chiyu, seems no smaller. I spoke slowly and deliberately. Chiyu, however, could no longer contain his rage. His eyes bulged with fury, his gaze upon me nothing short of venomous. He struggled to rise, but my men had already administered a bone-softening powder. Despite his frantic efforts, he couldn't pull himself off the floor. I addressed my men outside, "Send word that Lady Shui has borne General Qi his first son. He now wishes to divorce this princess and make Lady Shui his lawful wife." With that, I departed with Mu Baichen. Back in my chambers, Mu Baichen offered to help me out of my cloak, but I waved him off. Sitting before the mirror, I handed him my comb. "Do my hair," I said. "I must return to the palace at daybreak." True to my expectations, as dawn broke, palace attendants arrived to summon me. The emperor had just concluded court and was now attending to affairs in his study. The eunuch at the door announced my arrival and ushered me in. I curtsied. "Uncle, why summon Nanyang so early? Is there something you require?" I had forced myself through a sleepless night, and now my dark circles were so pronounced, even makeup couldn't conceal them. The emperor sighed and handed me a memorial. I opened it to find the Chancellor's accusation against Chiyu. The Chancellor certainly acted swiftly. Had he drafted this overnight? Not that I was surprised. The Chancellor and the Qi family were allies, yet each harbored their own schemes. There was only one throne, yet both coveted it. If they could form an alliance for profit, they could just as easily turn on each other for profit. Chiyu had brought Jiang Yingxue back originally to intimidate the Chancellor. Once the Chancellor was dealt with, Jiang Yingxue would naturally become useless. After all, the orphan of the Jiang family was still a significant threat to them. However, yesterday I deliberately had someone emphasize that Jiang Yingxue had given birth to a firstborn son, one who might soon become the eldest son of the legitimate heir. To the Chancellor, this was naturally a dangerous signal. Fearing Qi might act first, he rushed over at the crack of dawn to report this development. After all, neither the Qi family nor the Chancellor could seize the throne alone. Whoever ultimately ascends the throne must maintain a balance of power through marital ties and blood relations with the other. Thus, Lu Yingying must ultimately marry Chiyu, and Chiyu's legitimate eldest son can only be Lu Yingying's child. "Nanyang, your uncle won't let you suffer injustice. Rest assured, I'll send someone to warn him immediately. This child will be registered under your name." I smiled faintly. "Uncle, Nanyang refuses to bear another's child. Nanyang wishes to dissolve the marriage with Chiyu." My words choked off the emperor's consolation. "But Naturally, the emperor disliked the idea of dissolving my marriage to Chiyu. After all, it would leave him without leverage to restrain Chiyu. Of course, I wouldn't divorce Chiyu so quickly, I only said it to annoy him. But as a princess, Chiyu's actions were a direct affront to the emperor. Under my subtle pressure, the emperor ordered Chiyu to reflect at home for a month. In the end, I returned to the mansion with several cartloads of treasures bestowed by the emperor. No sooner had I returned than the main Qi family sent envoys demanding Jiang Yingxue be formally recognized as the principal wife. After our marriage, we had separated from the main Qi household and established our own residence. Naturally, the Qi family wished to maintain their alliance with the chancellor. They also hoped Qiyu's legitimate heir would be born to Lu Yingying. After all, Qiyu's actions amounted to a unilateral break with the chancellor. However, Chiyu was now confined by me, and all the household staff had been replaced with my own people yesterday. I did not allow the Qi family members to enter. I only had my attendants relay a message. Chiyu was currently occupied attending to his wife and child, and his decision was final. Upon receiving this message, the Qi family members slunk away in disgrace. The very next day, I heard that someone had filed a report accusing the chancellor's father-in-law of embezzling disaster relief funds. Though it was the chancellor's father-in-law, if investigated thoroughly, how clean could the chancellor himself be? Sure enough, these two factions had always harbored hidden agendas. Now, with just a slight push from me, they began tearing each other apart. Petitions accusing one another poured in like a flood before the emperor. I knew he was deeply troubled by this affair lately. The crimes they accused each other of were all trivial matters that couldn't touch the core. The court's factions were deeply intertwined, and the Qi family and the chancellor were two towering figures. The emperor couldn't touch them immediately, yet he couldn't ignore it either. Finding it headache-inducing, he simply handed the entire investigation over to the Supreme Court. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was a scholar from humble origins whom the emperor had promoted, intending to cultivate him as part of his own faction. Unfortunately, the emperor's wish was destined to go unfulfilled. The newly appointed Chief Justice was a student of my father. I had always believed my path was one of relentless bloodshed until death, but later I realized my parents had accomplished far more than I ever imagined. They seemed to have foreseen their own fate long ago, laying the groundwork for my present circumstances from the very beginning. The Minister of Justice handled the case impartially, resolving it swiftly and thoroughly. In the process, he unraveled the threads to place a bombshell on the emperor's desk. The chancellor's household had plotted rebellion. One could endure much, but treason struck at the very core of his being. His obsession with the throne was profound. Otherwise, he would never have driven my mother to such despair. Thus, the case of the chancellor's rebellion was swiftly adjudicated without much deliberation. The entire household was sentenced to execution. Knowing his fate was sealed, the chancellor made one final accusation against the Qi family before his death. Enraged, the emperor punished the Qi family as well. When the news reached the general's residence, I was playing with Jiang Yingshua's daughter. The little one neither cried nor fussed, just blinked her big eyes and smiled at me. Logically, Qi was also a member of the Qi family. Yet, given my connection to him and the dire shortage of capable generals in the court, the emperor specially pardoned Qiyu. He was merely exiled to guard the frontier, and I was to accompany him. That dog of an emperor truly seeks to exterminate us to the last. But Qiyu is already crippled by me. Stationing him at the frontier isn't impossible, though we'll need a new commander-in-chief. The frontier is harsh and bitterly cold, but for me, it's a prime opportunity for tempering. Besides, driving out the barbarian tribes has always been my mother's unfulfilled dying wish. Only one thing troubles me: Mu Baichen is frail. The frontier might be too much for him to endure. Yet he insisted on accompanying me. I told him, with me at the frontier, the capital needs someone to manage affairs. I trust no one else, only you can handle this. Mu Baichen looked conflicted, but finally nodded with difficulty. On the day of departure, the capital saw its first snowfall of the winter. He stood in the snow to see me off. Long after our carriage had disappeared into the distance, he remained rooted to the spot, his white robes seeming to merge with the vast, blank expanse of white that stretched across the land. 2 years later. I had been at the frontier for exactly 2 years. This border region felt like heaven and earth apart from the emperor. The emperor deliberately made things difficult for Qiyu and me, skimping on supplies for the frontier soldiers. Yet, in that year, I still won many battles. However, I never sent any news of these victories back to the capital. I imagine the emperor still believes Qiyu and I are suffering hardships at the frontier. It took me 3 months to drive the barbarian tribes back to their grassland homelands. When they sought tribute in peace, I told their chieftain, "Keep the offerings for yourselves. There's no need to go to the trouble of transporting them all the way to the capital." And I guaranteed no military action against them for the next 10 years. The Xiongnu's tribute was exceptionally generous, enough to keep my soldiers well-fed and warm for quite some time. With the frontier threat temporarily averted, I began planning my return to the capital. The borderlands' winters always brought fierce blizzards, and I needed to be back before the snow fell. Lost in these thoughts, my aide delivered a letter. It was from Mu Baichen. Since my departure, he had sent me a letter every 10 days or so. Sometimes I replied, other times, when the fighting was fierce, I simply couldn't find the time. Yet somehow, even when I was on the battlefield, his letters always reached me punctually and intact. Most of his letters inquired about my well-being, urging me to take care of myself amid the hardships of the frontier. Occasionally, he would slip in a sentence or two about his own affairs. It was through his letters that I learned how, in the imperial examinations the spring after my departure, he rose to fame overnight, becoming the youngest top scholar of his era. Within just 2 short years, he had already ascended to the position of Minister of Revenue. Though astonished by the speed of his rise, I wasn't truly surprised. After all, with his talents, it was hardly a difficult feat. His letters described the grand procession when he rode through the streets on horseback, the mansion bestowed upon him by the emperor, the embarrassing antics of his fellow officials, the new pastry shop that opened on West Street, and how the emperor, obsessed with cultivating immortality to produce an heir, had recently become so preoccupied that matchmakers had worn out 3 of his doorsteps. Finding it bothersome, he simply had the doorsteps removed. Having just secured a decisive victory and preparing to return to the capital, I summoned paper and brush to write him a reply. Our forces have achieved a resounding triumph. I shall return to the capital shortly. Do not fret. After composing my response, I ordered the army to prepare. Within days, we would set out for the capital. Over the past year, as my military prowess spread far and wide along the frontier, the size of my forces had grown considerably. I divided my personal guard into 2 units, one remained to garrison the frontier, while the other accompanied me back to the capital. When the first snow of winter fell upon the capital, I finally returned to the city I had left 2 years prior. Since I had returned without official permission, the emperor was unaware of my arrival. Yet I made no secret of it. After stationing my troops outside the city, I strode confidently through the gates. Mu Baichen had been waiting for me at the city gate since early morning. Despite the same heavy snowfall, Mu Baichen looked unchanged from 2 years prior. A thick layer of snow had already accumulated on his shoulders. I reached out to brush it off, unsure how long he had stood motionless in the snow. He clasped my calloused hand without speaking, simply standing quietly beside me. I traced the contours of his brow and eyes. His face had grown more gaunt, his features more mature, yet he remained as strikingly handsome as ever. My own face, weathered by 2 years of frontier winds and sand, had never troubled me. But in that moment, I suddenly worried my skin might have grown coarse and unattractive. As if reading my thoughts, Mu Baichen's hand gently touched my cheek. Ji grows more beautiful each day. I smiled at him, then took his hand and led him back to the estate. His earlier letter had mentioned that the former general's mansion had been bestowed upon him by the emperor as his residence. My old courtyard remained, unchanged. Yet before I could step inside, envoys dispatched by the emperor invited me into the palace. Mu Baichen wished to accompany me, but palace guards stopped him. I gave him a reassuring look, my hand hidden in my sleeve, rubbing it gently. Inside the palace, I was led to the emperor's bedchamber. Not long after I left, the emperor's health had deteriorated. With no heir to the throne, he had grown increasingly obsessed, even becoming deeply engrossed in seeking immortality and pursuing Taoist teachings. Stepping into the emperor's bedchamber, I found it shrouded in smoke, a foul, burnt stench permeating the entire hall. "Nan Yang, come here. Let your uncle have a look." He beckoned to me standing outside the chamber. Before the bed, a concubine knelt, spooning medicine into his mouth. I took a few steps inside and saw the emperor's true appearance. Were it not for the fact that only the emperor could reside here, I might not have recognized the emaciated old man lying on the bed as the sovereign. Though barely past 40, he appeared like a man nearing the end of his days. "Come here, come to your uncle's side." He weakly patted the spot beside him, and those 2 strokes seemed to drain him of all his strength. The concubine beside him promptly and discreetly stepped aside, standing with lowered eyes and submissive demeanor. This young consort appeared barely of marriageable age, her vibrant life force stifled before it could bloom, destined to wither away in this lifeless palace. Her youthful face only served to highlight how little time remained for my half-dead imperial uncle. "Where is General Qi? Why isn't he with you?" I smiled faintly. "Qiyu has been stripped of his command. Now, the entire army obeys only me. I am their sole commander." The emperor coughed sharply twice, his chest heaving violently. "You resemble your mother." "No, you surpass her in power." I gave no clear answer, merely waving the young concubine away. She sensed the hint and withdrew. Leaning close to the emperor's bedside, I murmured, "Do you know why you never produced an heir all these years?" "Because my mother. Long before your wedding, she administered a drug that rendered you incapable of fathering children." The emperor's eyes widened in disbelief, his chest heaving even more violently. "No. Impossible. Believe it or not, it doesn't matter. Uncle, I am now the sole bloodline of the Shin royal family. Did you ever think of this day when you killed my mother?" "No. I never intended to harm my imperial sister. Had she behaved herself?" "Enough." I cut him off. "It was your own incompetence, yet you blamed my mother's excellence." With that, I drew from my sleeve the imperial edict my grandfather had hidden for over a decade. "Uncle, does this look familiar?" The emperor lunged to snatch the edict from my grasp, but I deftly evaded him. A hoarse, unpleasant laugh erupted from his throat. Footsteps echoed behind me. Turning, I saw Mu Baichen being escorted in by the emperor's guards. "My dear nephew, Nanyang, look who your uncle has brought for you." I rose to my feet. "What do you want?" Mu Baichen's hair was slightly disheveled, yet his clothes remained immaculate. He shook his head at me, signaling I was safe. "Master Menghua said that with just a drop of your heart's blood, I can reshape my mortal form." Madness flared in his eyes as he gripped my sleeve fiercely. "Nanyang, just a drop of your heart's blood, and uncle will let you both go." I snorted derisively, drawing the long sword at my waist to thrust it toward the emperor's heart. The emperor flashed a triumphant smile at me. "Kill him." In the next instant, the emperor's elite guards closed in around me. "GG." Mu Baichen's words hadn't even finished when a dagger pressed against his throat. If I were alone, I could barely handle the number of assassins. But if I had to save Mu Baichen too, I wouldn't be able to manage. I gave a cold laugh and charged forward with my sword raised. For every assassin I cut down, another would take its place. My strength was slowly fading, and I didn't know if I could hold out until reinforcements arrived. Seeing my state, Mu Baichen's eyes hardened with resolve. He seized the guard's wrist and thrust his neck toward the dagger. "Mu Baichen!" I cried out, flinging my sword forward. The guard's hand was severed, and the sword's momentum swept through Mu Baichen's shoulder, cutting his hair clean off. Dark strands scattered across the floor. "Princess!" We arrived too late to save His Majesty. The voices of the reinforcements echoed from outside the hall. I exhaled deeply, they had finally arrived. My reinforcements swiftly dealt with the Emperor's last loyalists. Mu Baichen remained rooted to the spot. I picked up the long sword before him and brushed his hair back. I led him before the Emperor, who knew his end was near. Even in death, he struggled, "Minister Mu. With your talents, you shouldn't." Mu Baichen shook his head. I swore an oath. For Xixi, I would brave fire and water, without hesitation. I thrust my sword into the Emperor's heart. He died with eyes wide open. With the Emperor dead and no heir, the nation could not remain without a ruler for a single day. I was the sole remaining bloodline of the imperial family. The next morning, when the ministers entered court and saw me seated upon the dragon throne, they were all taken aback. I wiped the bloodstains from last night's sword, gazing silently at the assembled courtiers below the dais. Then my grandfather emerged, shuffling tremulously from the rear of the hall. He had returned to the capital some time before me. My grandfather, a veteran statesman who served 3 reigns and tutored 2 emperors, had a son late in life who became the emperor's son-in-law, my father. Who in the capital did not know this? Sure enough, the moment my grandfather appeared, all fell silent. He produced the late emperor's genuine will. The rightful heir had always been my mother. My ascension was now entirely justified. This removed much opposition to my ascension, though some stubborn old guard factions threatened death. Let them die, I cared not. The vacant positions would simply be filled by those I had cultivated myself. After several bloody scenes in the grand hall where I appointed new officials on the spot, everyone fell into line. Those who should resign did so, those who should take office did. Yet the matter of my empty harem remained unresolved. After my ascension, the capital abounded with tales of love at first sight, heroes rescuing beauties, childhood sweethearts, and innocent childhood friends. Suddenly, not a single eligible man of marriageable age could be found in the capital, a fact that truly pained me. Mu Baichen entered just as I was sighing in frustration. I teased him deliberately. How humiliating for an emperor to have not a single woman in his harem. Mu Baichen placed the memorials on my desk, his eyes lowered in deference. Baichen seeks no official status. I shall always remain by your majesty's side. It made my teeth itch. After all, the largest matchmaking agency in the capital was run by you, young man. You must be counting money faster than you can keep up these days. But then I recalled the trouble I went through when dismissing the former empress's palace attendants. Figuring out how to settle all those weeping women truly took its toll. Thinking about it that way, streamlining the harem actually seemed rather sensible. I pulled Baichen to sit beside me, resting my head on his lap. Tell me, I murmured, how would you feel if I issued an edict tomorrow proclaiming you my empress? I distinctly felt Baichen stiffen, though his expression remained composed. Whatever you wish, Gigi. But his flushed ears betrayed him. I rose and retrieved a blank sheet of paper. The very first line proved challenging. This was my first time drafting such an imperial edict. Mu Baichen's hand covered mine. Guiding me stroke by stroke, he wrote, to hold your hand, to grow old together. The end,